At first, I thought it was a prank. No caller ID. No message. Just a call at 2:47 a.m. from a number labeled unknown. I let it ring out. I don't answer calls like that anymore. But then it rang again. Same number. Exactly 1 minute later. And this time, I answered. Nothing. No voice. No static. Just breathing. Soft. Shaky. Familiar. Then, like a whisper down a tunnel. Ezrin. No one calls me that anymore. No one should. That name belongs to a man who died a long time ago. Somewhere between the stained motel receipt I found in her coat pocket and the moment she told me, straight-faced, he's married. Yes, but not like you think. 15 years have passed since she vanished. And when I say vanished, I mean vanished. Not moved away. Not blocked me. Not even a dramatic goodbye. I mean, disappeared. No forwarding address. No explanation. No closure. Just gone. And now this call? I hung up. Not because I was angry, but because I felt something I hadn't felt in over a decade. Fear. Let me be clear, I didn't rebuild my life. I patched it. I duct taped it. I stapled it into something passable. I rent a studio above a bakery that burns their croissants. I feed my neighbor's cat because she forgot she owns one. I make exactly $1,782 a month working midnight shifts in data entry for a company that doesn't exist on Google Maps. This is not a comeback story. This is a man who learned to live quietly. A man who taught himself how to forget. Until tonight. Until she called. Not texting. Not emailing. Not bumping into me online. Calling. In the middle of the night. Like I was still hers to find. I spent the next hour sitting on my kitchen floor with the lights off, staring at nothing. I didn't need to hear more. I already knew. Something went wrong. With him. With them. With whatever fantasy she destroyed 2 families for. The way she said my name, it wasn't a greeting. It was a confession. And I'm not proud to admit this. But some part of me wanted to hear it. Some part of me needed her to say it out loud, finally. That she was wrong. But I also knew. This wasn't a story that would end with an apology. This was something else. Something still bleeding. And God help me. I was about to pick up the knife again. The second call came at 5:12 a.m. I hadn't slept a minute. I didn't even hesitate this time. I picked up before the first ring finished, phone pressed to my ear, heart thudding like I was standing on a ledge. She didn't start with hello. She just said, "He's dead, Ezrin." 3 words. No preamble. No softness. I didn't ask who. I already knew. Martin. The married man she left me for. The man she burned her whole life down to be with. The man she once called her rebirth. Dead. She said it again, this time slower, like her mouth had to relearn the shape of the word. Martin is dead. And then something happened I wasn't ready for. She started laughing. Not loud, not hysterical, but that strange, bitter laugh people do when the world no longer makes sense. I stayed silent, my hand shaking as I gripped the kitchen counter, half expecting this was some twisted performance art. She was an actress, after all. Always had been, even before the affair. But this didn't sound like a woman performing. This sounded like a woman unraveling. Then she whispered. I thought it would feel like freedom. Silence. She didn't cry. She didn't explain. And I didn't interrupt. Because if I opened my mouth, I wasn't sure what would come out. Anger, disgust, relief. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 1,000 times, and in every version, I was strong, composed, maybe even cruel. But the real thing? It didn't feel like victory. It felt like drowning in a memory I tried to set on fire. She asked if I still lived in the same place. I lied and said no. She asked if I was happy. I lied and said yes. She asked if I ever forgave her. And I paused, not because I needed time to think, but because I needed her to sit in that silence. To feel it wrap around her like smoke in a burning room. She spoke again before I could answer. Ezrin, I didn't just call to tell you he's dead. I need to talk to you in person. There's something you don't know. Something I couldn't say back then. I nearly dropped the phone. I wanted to scream at her. Back then, there were hundreds of things she didn't say back then. Why now? Why me? But what I said instead surprised even me. Where are you? She exhaled like I'd handed her an oxygen mask underwater. I'm in Belcroft. Staying at the old motel off Mill Road. Room 209. Belcroft was an hour away. She hadn't just randomly called me. She was already here. She came back. To the town she swore she'd never return to. To me. She must have been planning this. For how long? And more importantly, why now? After everything, after torching my heart, vanishing from my life, and choosing a man who swore in court that his marriage was already dead in spirit, what could she possibly want from me? I didn't sleep. I didn't shower. I didn't tell Isla. At 6:23 a.m., I grabbed my keys, stepped into my car, and drove through the foggy morning toward a motel I hadn't seen in over a decade. And I swear to you, somewhere around the 30-minute mark of that drive, I nearly turned the wheel into a tree just to make it all stop. But I didn't. Because despite every self-respecting bone in my body telling me to walk away, I needed to know what she meant when she said, "There's something I couldn't say back then." Something tells me whatever it is, she didn't come back just to say sorry. The motel looked exactly like the kind of place someone rents when they don't want to be found. 2 floors, peeling paint, a busted ice machine humming beside a faded Coke machine no one had stocked in years. I parked across the lot from room 209, engine running, half expecting her to peek through the blinds the way she used to when she heard me coming home late. But no movement, no flicker of light, just silence. My hand stayed on the wheel for a good minute. I wasn't nervous. I was numb. Like every cell in my body agreed not to feel anything until this was over. When I finally stepped out, the air smelled like old rain and exhaust fumes. I approached the door, hesitated, and knocked. Twice. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. I tried the handle. It turned. Unlocked. I pushed the door open slowly. The room smelled faintly of cigarettes and lavender. One of those fake scents they pump through motel air fresheners. The lamp beside the bed was on, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. The bed was unmade. A half-empty bottle of ginger ale stood on the nightstand. And on the table near the window, beside a stack of old receipts and a chipped mug, sat a single folded envelope. My name was written on the front. Ezrin. No dear. No hi. Just my name in her handwriting. The kind that always looped the Z too tall and pressed the N too flat, like she was rushing through the name before it hurt to write it. I looked around again. No luggage. No purse. No signs of her. I opened the envelope. Inside was a note, handwritten. A single sheet. No signature. No date. I didn't come back to ask for forgiveness. I came back because you're the only one who knows the version of me that existed before I became this. I need that man to see something with his own eyes. Something I buried a long time ago. If you're reading this, I've already left. Don't follow. Not yet. You'll understand soon. There was more. Beneath the note was a photo. Not a recent one. It was old. Faded. Black and white. Looked like it had been taken with a disposable camera. In it, Callie was sitting on the edge of a bench in what looked like a hospital hallway. Her hair was shorter. Her face was paler. And beside her was a child. A boy. 4, maybe 5 years old. Brown curls. Oversized hoodie. Wide eyes that reminded me of someone I used to know. I stared at the photo for so long I forgot to breathe. Who was this kid? Why was she in a hospital? And why did she think I needed to see this? I sat down on the edge of the bed, the springs groaning beneath me, that picture burning a hole in my fingers. None of this made sense. None of it matched the woman who left me 15 years ago, giddy and fearless, wrapped around a man she said made her feel alive again. This was someone else entirely. And if I wasn't losing my mind, that boy, he had my eyes. Same lashes. Same crooked left eyebrow. The same exact dimple when he half smiled. My stomach turned to stone. I hadn't seen her in 15 years. But that boy, he couldn't be older than 10. And suddenly it hit me. This wasn't just a reunion. It was a detonation. And I had no idea what she had just dropped in my lap, or what it would cost me to survive it. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the motel room, the photo in one hand, the letter in the other, watching the sun rise through nicotine-stained curtains. My thoughts kept looping around that boy's face, his small fingers clutching Callie's sleeve in the photo like he was afraid to let go. If he was mine, she kept him hidden from me for almost a decade. If he wasn't, then why did he look like me? By 7:45 a.m., I couldn't sit still anymore. I needed answers, and not the kind you find in motel drawers or voice messages. I had to find her, not just to understand what she was doing back in town, but to look her in the eye and ask the one question that haunted me most. Why now? I figured if she was staying at the old motel on Mill Road, she'd probably visited a few nearby places since arriving, places she used to frequent, or at least where she wouldn't be recognized too easily. And Callie was always drawn to diners. The cheaper the coffee, the more likely she was to leave a generous tip. I remembered that. So I drove 5 minutes down to Watson's Diner, the one with the cracked neon sign and sun-faded booths that hadn't changed since the 80s. When I walked in, the place was mostly empty except for a man sitting at the far end of the counter, slowly stirring sugar into his coffee like he was counting the grains. The waitress, maybe early 20s, gave me a tight smile and asked if I wanted a booth. I shook my head and slid onto a stool at the counter, trying not to look like a man who hadn't slept, eaten, or blinked in 6 hours. I asked casually if a woman, early 40s, auburn hair, tired eyes, had been in recently. Said she might have come by the past day or two, looking for someone. The waitress shrugged, but the man at the end of the counter turned his head slightly, just enough for me to see one eye beneath the brim of his trucker cap. You asking about Callie? His voice was gravel and smoke, the kind that had spent too many years drinking alone. I froze. You know her? He didn't answer right away. He reached for his coffee, took a sip, and set it back down like he was trying to decide whether I was worth the truth. She was here yesterday morning. Sat right there. He pointed at the stool next to mine. Ordered black coffee. No food. Said she was waiting on someone. Did she say who? He shook his head. Didn't have to. She looked nervous. The kind of nervous people get when they're hoping someone doesn't show up. I felt my pulse in my teeth. He studied me for a long second. You Ezrin? I blinked. Yeah. He didn't act surprised. If anything, he looked disappointed. She left this. He reached into the pocket of his flannel jacket and pulled out a folded paper napkin. Told me if a guy came in looking like he hadn't slept since Bush was president and asked about a woman with tired eyes, I should give him this. I took the napkin with shaking fingers. It was folded 3 times, like she wanted it to stay secret even while it was in someone else's pocket. Inside was a sentence. Just one. If he finds me before you do, don't let him take the boy. I read it again. Then a 3rd time. The man leaned in slightly. I don't know who she was talking about, but I got the feeling she wasn't running from you. My throat was dry as ash. Did she say where she was going? He gave a subtle nod toward the window. North. Asked about the old Greenlock Bridge. Nobody goes that way unless they're trying to disappear. That bridge had been condemned years ago. A twisted stretch of iron and rotted wood that connected to the forest roads outside town. No cameras. No lights. No cops. I stood up so fast my stool tipped backward and clattered to the floor. I didn't apologize, because everything in my chest had turned to thunder. She wasn't just hiding. She was being hunted. And whoever he was close enough that she thought I might run into him first. I had no idea what was waiting for me at Greenlock Bridge, but something told me I was about to find out why she vanished 15 years ago and why she never told me what she left behind. The drive to Greenlock Bridge felt like crossing into a forgotten version of the world. The roads grew narrower, swallowed by fog that rolled down from the hills like something alive. The radio picked up nothing but static, and the trees leaned so close together that it felt like they were whispering about me. I hadn't been out this way since before the fire, back when the bridge was still open, before the county declared it unsafe. But I remembered how to get there. Some places stay carved into your bones no matter how hard you try to erase them. By the time I reached the edge of the forest road, the sun had completely disappeared behind a curtain of clouds. My headlights flickered across the old warning sign. Danger, structurally unsafe. Half the letters were chipped away, but I got the message. I killed the engine and stepped out. The air was cold enough to sting. I could smell rust, moss, and the faint metallic scent of rain that hadn't fallen yet. The bridge itself rose out of the mist ahead of me, a crooked skeleton of steel and wood, broken rails hanging like snapped ribs over the river below. I kept walking. Every step made the boards creak like they were protesting my weight, but I didn't stop. I had that napkin in my pocket, her words etched into my head like a curse. If he finds me before you do, don't let him take the boy. I didn't even know who he was, or why there was a boy at all, but every instinct told me the answers were somewhere out here. Halfway across the bridge, I saw something caught between 2 planks. It looked like fabric. I crouched down, tugged at it, and pulled out a small knitted mitten, gray with a faint blue stripe at the wrist. Too small for an adult. My stomach clenched. The edges were damp, but not from rain. It was as if someone had dropped it recently. My first thought was that the boy had been here. My second was that someone else had, too. I turned, scanning the tree line. That's when I saw the tracks. Fresh tire marks in the mud, angled toward the riverbank. Whoever came here didn't stay long. I followed the tracks until they disappeared near a cluster of rocks. That's where I found the second clue. A phone. Old. Cracked. But still faintly glowing with battery. It wasn't locked. When I tapped the screen, it opened to a single photo, one taken earlier that day. Callie, standing right there at the edge of the bridge, holding the same mitten in her hand. She was looking over her shoulder, eyes wide, like she wasn't the one taking the picture. Like she didn't even know it was being taken. Behind her, just barely visible in the corner of the frame, was a figure. Tall, wearing a dark jacket, face obscured. Watching her, I felt something inside me snap in half. Fear, rage, confusion, it all mixed into one sharp, nauseating feeling that made my chest ache. I called out her name into the mist, but my voice sounded small, useless. The river below swallowed it whole. Then I heard it, a sound that made every hair on my arm stand up. A car engine, distant but approaching fast. Headlights flared through the trees, bouncing off the fog, growing closer by the second. I backed up, hiding behind the rusted side rail, heart pounding hard enough to shake my ribs. The car slowed near the sign, lights sweeping across the bridge before cutting out completely. The engine went silent. For a long time, nothing happened. Then the driver's door creaked open. A man stepped out. I couldn't see his face clearly, but he moved with the kind of calm that doesn't belong to someone startled or lost. He walked to the edge of the bridge, looking around slowly like he already knew exactly where to search. He reached into his jacket and pulled something from his pocket, a folded piece of paper, and dropped it onto the wooden boards before turning back toward the car. He didn't see me, but as he drove away, I stepped out and picked up what he'd left behind. It was another note. Same handwriting as hers, but this one wasn't for me. It said, "He knows about the child. It's too late." I read it twice, 3 times, until the words blurred. My vision burned. For a second, I thought about throwing it into the river and pretending none of this was happening. But I couldn't, because every fiber of me knew the truth now. This wasn't about a love affair anymore. This was about a secret big enough to kill for. And if Callie was still alive, she was running from something far worse than regret. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Not after reading that note. He knows about the child. It's too late. I just sat in my car, parked in the trees off the bridge road, with the heat barely working and the windshield fogging over with each anxious breath I took. I stared at my own reflection in the rearview mirror and tried to figure out when exactly I lost control of my life. When did I stop being a person and start being a question no one would answer? The stranger from the bridge. Who was he? He wasn't just following her. He knew she'd be there. He left that note for someone. Maybe me. Maybe someone else. But he didn't panic when he saw the motel wasn't safe anymore. He didn't storm around or search the woods. He left his message, and he vanished. Calm, like he was used to disappearing. I knew I had to get off that road before someone came back for me, but I couldn't bring myself to leave without one more look. I walked back onto the bridge, crunching through broken planks and windswept leaves until I reached the spot where the phone had been. I checked the muddy edge near the bank, found a trail of smaller footprints leading away into the woods. I counted the steps, the stride. It wasn't an adult. That boy had been out here. Alone or with her, I didn't know. But someone else had found them. And judging by that message, they weren't done yet. I made a decision I never thought I'd make again. I went to see Father Darnell. Now, I'm not religious. Not anymore. Faith and I broke up around the same time Callie and I did. But back then, when I was a different man, I used to go to Darnell's little church near the railroad tracks. He was blunt, dry as bone, and had a face like he'd swallowed too much bad news in his life. But he never judged, and he never forgot a soul that passed through his door. He opened it before I even knocked. "Didn't think I'd see you again," he said, still wearing that old maroon cardigan with the loose buttons. I didn't either. He let me in, poured 2 cups of bitter black coffee, and sat across from me in that dusty office that smelled like burnt wax and yellowed paper. I didn't waste time. I told him about the call, the letter, the photo, the boy. I showed him the napkin, the mitten. I laid it all out like a confession I didn't expect absolution for. When I mentioned the man on the bridge, something changed in his expression. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. But he leaned back slightly, like someone had just turned down the temperature in the room. Did he have a ring on? Darnell asked. I frowned. What? On his right hand. A thick silver ring. Worn smooth. Looks plain, but if you know what to look for, you'll see the engraving inside. I hesitated, replaying the image in my mind. Yes, he did. Why? Darnell sighed, rubbed his jaw, and stood. He opened a desk drawer, rummaged through some old church newsletters and sermon notes, and pulled out a manila folder. It was thin, worn, labeled in faded marker, Project Caligo. He tossed it on the table between us. Your wife came to see me 8 months ago, he said. My breath caught. She what? She didn't tell me everything. But she asked questions no normal person asks. Wanted to know if I remembered a group from the late 90s that used to operate out of Bellmere County. Said they were trying to restructure families. Whatever that meant. Said she'd gotten involved with them briefly after the divorce. That she'd seen things she couldn't explain. I stared at him. What does this have to do with that man? Because one of the names she mentioned was a man named Merrill Frost. Former counselor. Worked under a religious nonprofit in Bellmere. Disappeared in 2011. Rumor was he'd gone underground. Started working as a freelance fixer for families in crisis. But not the kind of fixing you want. You think that's him? I think if he left you a note, he didn't do it out of kindness. I flipped open the folder. Inside were scanned pages, mostly redacted, with photos paper-clipped to the top corners. Blurry images of people sitting in circles. Some pages included quotes. One stood out, highlighted in yellow. Our goal is not to erase the past. It is to overwrite it. I looked up at Darnell. What does this mean? He didn't answer right away. Then finally, it means if they've got your son, Ezrin, you'd better pray they haven't had him for long. The word son rang in my ears like a bell that wouldn't stop echoing. I stood. I need to find her. You're not the only one who's looking, Darnell said quietly. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't want to. Because for the first time since this started, I realized. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about a boy I didn't know I had. And a machine far bigger than regret that had been turning, quietly, behind the scenes of my ruined marriage. And now, it was turning toward me. The phone rang at 2:03 a.m. again. Same pattern. No caller ID. Same cold weight in my chest before I even reached for it. I was back at my apartment by then, though it didn't feel like home anymore. I hadn't spoken to Isla. I didn't even know what I'd say if I did. The only light in the room came from the TV I'd muted hours ago, still stuck on a frozen commercial for some prescription drug I couldn't name. I picked up the phone, said nothing. Then I heard it. Ezrin. Listen carefully. Callie's voice. But not her cadence. Not her rhythm. This wasn't how she sounded when she spoke. It was how she read instructions. Dry, stripped of emotion. Like someone was behind her, holding a gun just out of frame. You have one chance, the voice said, pausing between syllables like they were being chosen for her. There's a car parked outside St. Jocelyn's. Driver won't speak. Back seat's unlocked. If you want the truth, get in. I sat up straight. Where's Callie? No answer. Is she alive? A beat of silence. Then a click. Deadline. I bolted up and ran to the window. It had started raining, soft, almost delicate, but the world outside looked like it had been drained of color. And there it was. A silver sedan. Parked beneath the street lamp. Engine off. Lights off. Windows dark. I grabbed my coat and keys, heart pounding in a way that made me wonder if it would hold together for another hour. I approached the car slowly, looking for any signs of movement, any silhouette, any mistake that would let me back out. But the front windows were fogged, the back ones tinted. When I reached the rear passenger door and touched the handle, it opened without resistance. Inside, on the seat, was an envelope and a cassette recorder. No driver. No one in the front seats. I looked around the street. Nothing. Just wet pavement and quiet houses. I slid into the back seat and closed the door behind me. The silence wrapped around me like wet wool. I picked up the recorder, heart screaming that this was insane, but my hands moved anyway. I pressed play. Her voice again, but different. This time, shaking. I don't know who they told you I am, she said. But whatever you think you know about me, about the affair, the boy, Martin, it's all been rewritten. They erased it. They made me believe things that never happened. And now they're doing it to him. To our son. The word hit me like a hammer. She said it. Our son. She kept talking, but the words started to blur as my vision went hot with tears I hadn't let out since the divorce. She told me about a facility, unnamed. No signage. Outside county lines. She said it wasn't just a group. It was a system. People trained to manipulate memory, to replace entire chunks of identity with ones more cooperative. They didn't just want obedience. They wanted grateful obedience. She'd been a test subject. So had Martin. So had others. But the boy, our boy, he was different. She said he could resist, and that made him dangerous. They'll try to reset him, she whispered. They call it reformatting. It's irreversible. If they do it, you won't recognize him. And he won't recognize you. He'll have no memory of who he is, or what they took from him. You have to get to him before they do it. There's not much time. The tape ended with a date, a single line of coordinates, and her voice, trembling now. I didn't run because I was scared of you. I ran because you were the only person they couldn't erase. Because you remembered me before all of this. I rewound the tape and listened to it again, and each time, something new registered. A catch in her throat. The pause before she said the word son. The way her voice cracked when she said reformatting. I knew then, with a clarity that scared me. They weren't trying to erase the past. They were trying to reprogram it. And I was the only person left who knew how the story was supposed to go. The drive to the coordinates took me through the kind of roads you don't find on maps. Twisting gravel veins through dense woods, long-forgotten paths carved by time and storm. Rain had turned the soil to sludge, and my tires protested every mile. I didn't care. I drove like my soul depended on it. Because maybe it did. The coordinates led to a clearing. No signs. No buildings. Just a small wooden structure half sunk into the hillside, camouflaged by years of overgrowth. It looked like an abandoned storm shelter at first. But the lock was new. The grass around the entrance was trampled. Someone had been here. Recently. I approached slowly, one hand in my jacket pocket, gripping nothing, just instinct. I didn't have a weapon. I had no plan. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't the same man who froze up when she first called. I wasn't the same man who had once begged for closure in silence. I wasn't broken anymore. I was angry. And I was ready. The door creaked as it opened. Inside, the air was cold and dry, humming faintly with electricity. A hallway stretched into the dark, lined with metal panels and dim red lights that blinked like eyes adjusting to my presence. I walked. I passed rooms. Some empty. Some with equipment I couldn't name. Some with nothing but chairs and mirrors. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Light. Uneven. Small. I turned. He stood there. The boy. Maybe 9. Maybe 10. Same curls. Same brow. His eyes were wide, uncertain. But they didn't look empty. They looked alive. He didn't speak. He just stared at me, like he recognized something he couldn't explain. I knelt down slowly, hands open. It's okay, I whispered. I'm your father. I know you don't remember. But I do. And that's enough for both of us. His lower lip trembled. Then, like a flood breaking loose, he ran forward and crashed into my chest, arms wrapping around me so tightly it knocked the air from my lungs. I held him. For minutes. Maybe hours. I don't remember. I just held him. Because I finally understood. He wasn't what I'd lost. He was what I'd been waiting for. A door opened behind us. I turned, expecting resistance. Instead, I saw her. Callie. She was pale, thinner, but whole. Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw 1,000 apologies, none of them spoken. She walked slowly, cautiously, unsure if I'd turn away. I didn't. I stepped forward, looked her in the eyes, and for the first time in 15 years, I smiled. You're late, I said. She laughed. It cracked in her throat like it hadn't been used in years. So are you. We didn't need more words. We left that place together. We didn't burn it down. We didn't call the press. We didn't try to fight a system too big for us to kill with truth alone. Instead, we did something louder. We disappeared. We moved across the country. Started fresh. Small town, near the coast. Our boy, Elias, he said he wanted to be called, started school last fall. He loves the ocean. Hates pickles. He draws little monsters in the margins of every notebook he owns. And sometimes, when he thinks I'm not looking, he watches me like he's still trying to understand what dad means. He's getting there. We all are. We don't talk much about what happened. It lives in a locked room inside all three of us. But sometimes, at night, I look at them sleeping on opposite ends of the couch, her legs curled beneath her, his head resting on her lap, and I realize something I never thought I'd believe again. This wasn't a story about betrayal. It was a story about rebuilding. Not the same house, not the same life. A better one, a quieter one. One built not on what we had, but on what we almost lost. And that makes all the difference.